All right, today is Wednesday, March 14, 2017. This is the meeting of the Kubernetes CSI Implementation Group. Let's jump right into the agenda. First off, our PRs that need to be discussed, and we've got a big fat warning from Luis about what the heck is going on with the drivers repo. Luis,
Yes.
you want to talk about this?
Yes. Right now, I've been noticing that there have been check-ins where master is not working, right? Or not passing Travis. I don't want to say it's working or not, but it's not passing Travis. And we need to not allow that. So what we need to do is first fix it, and then we need to figure out how is it that we can not enable that to ever happen again.
Yep.
So there is ways to enforce the PRs not to allow a merge by setting that value. I put that link there. I haven't done it yet. I can't do it, but I haven't done it yet. Administrator still has the override, which is Saad, but anybody else cannot hit the push button if the Travis does not agree.
So do we know why these PRs got merged with a broken Travis?
No, that I can investigate further, but I haven't spent the time into that.
Okay, let's investigate that a little more and understand what the reason was. If it was just lack of understanding or something like that, I think it makes sense to go ahead and turn on the setting to prevent accidents. If there was a legitimate reason, like I think one of the problems is that we have a bunch of different interdependent components, and when one of them gets out of sync, we have these weird interlocking dependencies that all need to be updated, and sometimes that leaves things in a funky state, but that should be the exception rather than the rule. And by default, we should make sure that tests or CI is green before we merge.
I agree, but one of the things that may happen is that CSI Sanity not pull master CSI Sanity. We need to put a hatch or a release so it's locked. That way, if we lock every dependency, that this shouldn't happen.
Yeah.
So that's my one thing on that.
Cool. No, that's great. Thank you for looking into this and driving that.
Oh, and one last thing is that on the proposal I have here is to move the drivers that people working on out of Kubernetes CSI. I've been saying that for a while, and I still think that needs to be done. And I think you and Brad need to kind of get together on that.
Yeah, Brad has a bunch of ideas on this. We kickstarted this discussion in the last few meetings. In particular, we're looking to move the test driver and the Cinder driver out because those are going to end up being production grade drivers. For Cinder, Xing, I'm not sure if she's on the call, is talking to the OpenStack SIG to figure out what the permanent home for that should be. Last time we talked, she was proposing either putting it in OpenStack or somewhere in Kubernetes. The SIG is going to figure that out. We had a slight preference for putting it in OpenStack because it should be agnostic to Kubernetes. Xing, do you have any updates on that?
I haven't heard from Dimsia, so let me ping him after the meeting.
Okay, cool. And the other driver was the NFS driver. Currently, Brad and Red Hat are willing to pick that up and put it into the org that Brad owns, the CSI Volumes one, which is not currently part of a foundation. I don't have a better idea, so I'm okay with this, but open to discussion here, and I'm sure Brad's open to discussion as well.
Okay. Well, I'm just bringing up another reason why is it that we need to
absolutely
lock down the stuff, because it's just getting, there's too many dependencies, too many goals inside drivers. It's just a dumping ground for stuff.
And question for you, is the Travis build for drivers building each one of the individual drivers?
It builds everything because it's the top group, right?
So
that's the problem too, right?
If any one of them fails, then the whole thing
fails. Yeah.
Blocked. Yeah.
And they're not dependent on each other.
Yeah. Yeah. Ideally, the only things that should be in drivers are like our basic minimalist,
host path probably
samples. Yeah.
But guys, host path actually becoming more and more complex because we're using it to test the CSI spec. So it cannot be minimalistic. It's becoming more like a complete driver. Maybe it doesn't have a production applications or use cases, but in terms of the complexity, it's as complex as my Ceph driver.
That's
Yeah.
a very good point.
And I agree with that. I just think that maybe it should just be host path driver in here. So.
The other thing is, does the structure for this repo make sense? Apps, hack, and package. Can we have at the top level the drivers themselves?
Well, I know I'm late to this conversation, but weren't we talking about busting this stuff out? I mean, we've already.
5 minutes late, Brad.
Do I?
You're 5 minutes late. We were just talking about that.
I know. I'm sorry. I had another call that was conflicting.
But yes, we are. We do want to break out definitely NFS and definitely Cinder and probably iSCSI as well. So Cinder, Xing is looking for a home for that. NFS, it sounds like Brad, you're going to pick that up. iSCSI might make sense to go along with where you're going to put NFS.
Well, I'm saying like what we learned from that external storage repo is that bundling this shit together is not a good idea ever.
Yeah.
Like
each one of these should be in a repo no matter what organization they live under.
I completely agree with that. And I just think that when we started with the drivers directory, it was just for simplicity of it. But I think that right now it's run its course and it needs to die.
So concretely, we're going to get Cinder out of there. We're going to get NFS out of here and potentially iSCSI. Then can we break the remaining 3 down into their own top level repos?
Yeah, I would love
it would be drivers dash or sample driver dash flex adapter, sample driver dash host path, something like that.
That would be awesome. I can definitely do that if you want.
Awesome. Can you add to the tasks for?
Well, you know, I wouldn't treat it as sample. Treat it as the source of truth on this stuff. I mean, we created this.
Yeah, I mean, for the remainders, like flex adapter, I guess we would have to be the source of truth here. Host path, we do.
Yeah.
So I guess driver dash would be sufficient.
Yeah, I mean, if someone wants to make a change to the Cinder or the NFS plugin, let's have them make a change in one. I'd have them fork it as a sample.
Yeah. So another task here is going to be, let's call it P1 after NFS, iSCSI, and Cinder have been moved out of driver repo, break driver repo into separate repos.
We can start with that with host path and flex. The other ones are going to stay around the area, so we just start with that immediately.
Okay, that would be fine with me.
Do you guys want to start moving these to the CSI volumes org, or do we want to keep them under this Kubernetes-CSI?
Let's keep the 3 basic ones in Kubernetes-CSI,
Okay.
and we can move the NFS and iSCSI ones to the CSI-volume 1.
Okay, so just worry about splitting them up for now, and then home them later.
That would be fine with me. PABON. Yes.
So is the host path, the CSI host path, eventually will that replace the in-source host path that we have now? Because I know host path is used, pretty much.
That's a good point. We haven't gotten to that point of figuring out what the migration story for the entry volume plugins looks like. I know definitely the ones that have cloud provider dependencies, we're going to have to move out and do CSI for them. But for the ones that don't have a cloud provider dependency like HostPath, we don't have a critical need to do so. The only reason would be to consolidate the code in one place instead of having it split across 2. But there is that added overhead of then having to run an extra volume plugin to get host path.
Right. That's exactly why.
If I may add something, to run a CSI driver, you need a host path, so it can't be CSI.
All right.
That's a good point.
That's a good point. I think what we'll do is that when we break it up, I'll put in this is used for interview testing. Right?
Yeah.
That's it.
So then should we label this host path as something that is purely for testing?
Yeah. I'll put it in the README.
Right, because then okay.
Okay. That sounds good to me. Let's keep moving. Luis, you have something about Canaries here?
Yes, yeah, they're just noticed today, thanks to Sergey, that all the Canaries were old, more than a month old. And what's happening is that people are starting to use 0.2, and 0.2 is also some hash that I don't know. So what I'm trying to say is that we fix all the Canaries now. They're all ready. And at some point, by hand, we take one of the Canaries and move it to 0.2,
Yes.
the ones that we agree on.
That makes sense. So do we have any containers that are currently tagged, or any images that are currently tagged as 0.2?
Yes, all of them are tagged as 0.2, and I don't even know what hash that is. So it's
Can we remove that?
Yeah, I can remove it.
Okay. So just have everything be a canary until we handpick the 0.2.
You got it.
All right. Thank you. Linus Probe with host path plugin. Who added this?
That's part of Sergey.
Yeah, right. So we had some discussions, and then basically Luis suggested maybe it should go in its separate repo and basically exist as an image. And there are some cons against going in that direction. One of them is Linus Probe. It really needs to live very close to the driver. Ideally, it should be part of the driver image, because then we can basically use the Kubernetes liveness probe approach and execute this binary in the context of the running driver. If you move it as a separate image, then at one point, one smart guy decided, okay, I want to run it as a pod, not as a sidecar container. In this case, it becomes completely useless, because even if the driver dies, then it will detect, but it kill itself. It doesn't. It will not kill the died driver. That's why I see.
The way, that's a good point. I just want to just mention what I was thinking, because I was confused about Linus Probe. Was that I viewed it as driver registrar style, which meant that in driver registrar is a living thing, which kind of is a bridge between two things. So I was looking at it as a bridge of a REST point or Linus Probe to a gRPC call. So it depends which direction you want to go. I don't really mind. But I was when I wrote that, I was in the impression that it was a bridge, like driver register.
Well, the first kind of a direction when we talked about the liveness probe was to use Kubernetes liveness probe mechanism. And that basically forces in the specific design decision. It has to be a binary, and it has to be called by Kubernetes liveness probe, and it has to return a code, yes or no. And then Kubernetes liveness will decide what to do with the pod, whether to keep leave it running or kill it.
Mm-hmm. That's why I thought that it was a REST point, because a liveness probe can do a REST point, and if it returns other than 200, then it will do something. That's so. But we can. You guys can decide what to do with it. I just thought that it was that.
So I'd like to better understand the argument against having it in a separate repo. It sounds like what you're saying is because it's so closely coupled with the individual drivers, it makes sense to co-locate them.
Yeah, right. So like example, you want to build a driver image, and you decided to use that liveness probe with that driver. So how would you marry these two pieces together when you build the container image? Maybe
so, the way I would imagine it is liveness probe sits in a separate repo. It has its own CI to build it and test it. And periodically there are releases for the liveness probe that are cut, the 0.1 release, the 0.2 release, so on and so forth. And anytime somebody writes a new driver, they can add a liveness probe by pointing to that image container and putting it into their pod as a liveness YAML.
Yeah, that's exactly what I thought it was.
Okay.
I don't think that Sergey is saying that that's the architecture that he was meant to.
Exactly, that's not the architecture, because you see, then we are talking about the extra kind of extra container in the pod, and then because the liveness probe, it's not a daemon, it just execute once, get the probe, and exits. So then I have to add some ugliness like while true command, basically to keep that container constantly running. And I mean, yeah, we used to use it in the past.
And let me make sure I understand the architecture correctly. This is baked into the driver binary, the plugin binary.
No, the binary is separate.
Oh, but it's in the
it's
same
baked
container.
in the image that driver runs. Right. So then basically then you can execute any binary located on that image within the liveness probe, Kubernetes liveness probe.
See, this is where Sergey and I were talking, and I understand that model. And I told him that for me, I would love to use the one that would be a REST bridge. It'd be simple, but included it in the binary in the image or the container. It would be really hard because I would have to go through the entire build system that we have for creating images and add it in. So I want to use this, but for me, the only way to use it would be as a REST bridge.
Yeah. And so, what was the drawback that you were saying with this approach? If we ended up splitting it into two containers,
then we need to use some mechanism to keep that container alive, because as I said, the liveness probe binary, it's a one-time execution.
So it sounds like the liveness probe binary, which is an adapter, should basically be a service so that it keeps running.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. If you want, Sergey, you and I can work offline on this on a different repo, and we can make it so that both of the requirements are successful. And then we can have it so that we can have like Linus Probe -d for like daemon and stays off with a rest point, or the way you have it, and then it will run that too.
Yeah. I think that would make it much more useful. One thing to keep in mind as you approach this is security. We want to make sure that we don't accidentally expose the Kubernetes, the CSI plugin to the entire cluster. We just want this very, very like narrow probe interface to be exposed. So I think the current proposal that Sergey has does that. If we break it into two containers, let's make sure that we keep security at the top of our minds.
Sure.
I just want to add one more thing to Vlad's comment. If you run it as a service, as in a container, then let's say if it detects the failure, right? So the container will start crashing, but it will not restart the driver container.
Right. And
because then how I mean, what's the use then? I don't get it.
So no, I understand that, and that was a question mark in my mind, because if we split it into its own pod or image, then does the whole pod get restarted if it fails, or is it just
That's a good question.
It will be just a container. Right. So because there is no liveness, Kubernetes liveness on the picture in this model.
Oh, so there's no probe, so it has to be part of the image.
Exactly, it has to be part of the image.
Sorry, I misunderstood that. Thank you.
And the other question too is, by adding this to the image, are we making the driver Kubernetes specific? Is that an issue? If not,
yeah, that's part of the concern.
I mean, it would, if it's just a binary sitting in the image, that's not a big deal. But it's just something that maybe we have to document or something.
Yeah. I think it could be something that a plugin can optionally expose. So the plugin could decide, I will expose this, and Kubernetes can use it, and other plugins could or other COs could potentially use it as well. But yeah, it does add something that is currently only Kubernetes specific into the plugin, which is not ideal. But I can see Sergey's point that this actually does need to be part of the same container. Yeah, I don't know what a good answer here is.
But Sergey, I do have a question though.
Mhm.
I can't remember because I vaguely remember read the mechanism behind liveliness. Is it just the pod that get restarted, or is it I'm sorry, is it just the container, or is it the whole pod?
Okay, liveness probe restarts the whole pod.
Okay.
And
So if it does
but
that, then
if the container, like if the single container crashes because of some reason, then only single container keeps crashing, but the rest of the containers are still alive.
right,
Oh,
but
okay,
if the probe detects that, then we're okay, unless it's the image for the driver. Then yes, it wouldn't work. If the driver is crashing, well, no, it should work because then the adapter would say that I can't get a response back, right?
Right.
So
But
then
it will crash itself only. Let's say you have a bundle in the pod with the 4 containers, right? So you have registrar, you have a driver, liveness probe, and something else. So let's say the driver dies. It stops responding to that socket. So it keeps crashing or doing something strange.
Right.
Then Linus Probe running in the in the different container, it will detect it and it will start crashing as well, but
Right.
it will not trigger the whole pod restart. That's what we want.
Yeah, agreed.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know too much about liveliness probe to even make a comment, but okay.
Okay. The other better approach for this, instead of bundling a binary, might be having a library that they can import, but I'm not sure if that's easier for developers or not.
Where will they import that, in the driver?
Yeah, I was thinking like have a single binary, and then the single binary could expose 2 services.
I mean, another approach.
Yeah, the hardest point is that a CSI driver is not supposed to know that it's running Kubernetes.
Yeah.
Right, and that's
right.
the thing.
So if you don't know, then
yeah,
I mean,
it's kind of like we're having like this discussion. We're trying to figure out something, and it's really hard because all these things are not meant to make this requirement succeed.
Yeah.
I just want to remind you the initial premise of the liveness probe was for the Kubernetes. So we are addressing specifically Kubernetes requirement to detect the failure. It's not supposed to be supported by other COs. So this is a very specific Kubernetes solution.
Yeah, and I agree. I'm just saying that if we're going to include it in an image, the image is supposed to be agnostic. So I'm trying to figure out, maybe we can go back to liveness probe and we can say we need a model where we need to restart the entire pod. You see, maybe that's the fix, that we go back to the API and talk to them about it.
Luis, what about like using a variable saying, okay, I want the binary in or I don't want the binary in, and that's it?
Yeah, but again, it goes to, we're asking, like, I'm just being honest, I would not want that in the binary, in the container for ports. We want to own that stuff, right? And we want to test it and QE it. So that, it makes it really very hard. But if it was sat outside, then we will be fine with it because the release cycle is completely different. What I'm trying to say is that it looks to me like if liveness probe does not restart the entire pod, then we need to, which probably doesn't, like you're saying, then we go to communicate this with the team. Maybe we can enhance it. Maybe there's something that working in the future. I don't know. Or maybe they never thought about this from this model, right? This use case. So.
Are we saying we're positively it doesn't restart the entire pod?
I don't know. That's something. Maybe we can take that offline and set a Q&A with one of the team members of that SIG.
I mean, because the unit of scheduling in Kubernetes is the pod. I think we definitely should make sure that whether it's the pod or the actual container that gets restarted. Obviously, if it's just a container, it doesn't do us any good. If it's the pod, then we're okay.
Okay, so let's take this discussion offline. Luis, Sergey, and Vlad, can you guys maybe set up a meeting or maybe start an email thread where you can discuss this?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
I think the concerns raised here are valid on both sides, and we need to find something that'll work. Ideally, we want all volume plugins to pick this up, but if the volume plugins aren't going to pick it up because of these concerns, then it's not as useful as it could be.
Wasn't this the intent behind the readiness probe we spent like 2 weeks arguing about?
Which one?
The readiness probe on the API, the spec. There's a probe call, right, to check
That's
it.
it. That's what
This uses that probe call.
Yeah.
So that discussion was a little bit different. It was about what is the purpose of the probe call at all. And I think we distilled that down into this use case, but the problem is hooking up that exposed method into Kubernetes requires an additional component, and where does that component go? Okay, let's keep moving along. Update docs for 1.10. Looks like this is from Felipe. Work in progress. Felipe, do you have any updates?
Yeah, so I've pushed a few more changes. It's not 100% done yet.
Okay.
I still have some questions though. Don't know if I should ask them now or just post
Sure.
there and you can answer later.
You
What do
can
you
ask
guys?
me now.
Now? Okay. So, all right. So we have the list of drivers on the using section, and I guess it needs to be somewhat updated. I imagine some links have changed, so I have to take a look at that. On the usage section, there is a link. There's a to be done link to the Kubernetes documentation on CSI volumes, and I imagine this will be the documentation you wrote, Saad, which will be on the official Kubernetes docs, let's say.
Yep.
So when we have a link for that, I could put it there.
Okay.
It's missing.
I think there's already, if you go to the Kubernetes documentation, underneath the volumes, there's a CSI section. If you just link there, it should be fine. We're just going to update the contents of that.
Okay, sure. Then for the development section, well, I guess I would like to know what has changed with regard to the interaction with the 3 components we need, other than the plugin, right? So maybe we could update that, especially regarding the changes on the CSI spec, because we do mention some of the methods of the services, of the 3 services. Maybe there's something we need to update. Don't know if I should just go through it and check what's differed, or if somebody could, just point me to something.
I think best thing would be to actually just go and test it.
Yeah.
See what works and what doesn't work, and that way we validate that
Okay.
what the actual state is versus what we've documented. And
Okay, sure. I can do that. No problem.
We're gonna forget things.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, and then I'll do the same for testing, and then I'll see well, if something doesn't work, I'll reach out to you guys and ask.
Perfect.
Yeah. Do we have a deadline for this?
By the 1.10 release, which is in 2 weeks, I believe, March 26th.
Okay. We have some time then. Okay.
Yep.
All right. Yeah, that's it. I'll
Cool.
reach out if I have more questions.
All right, cool.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is attacher should use volume attributes field instead of annotation.
Yeah, the PR is pretty straightforward. I have just one question. If we drop the annotation completely and forget it ever existed, or we support it in some way?
I would be okay dropping it because I don't think there was too much production. There wasn't any production usage that I'm aware of in the previous alpha release, so I would be okay just dropping it altogether.
Okay, that's what the PR does.
Okay. Cool. I will take a to-do to review that, and if anybody else is interested, please take a look at that too.
Oh, I have a question on this one. We already tested volume attributes with the NFS plugin. Is this, but this is, PR is not merged yet? I guess I'm just confused because we already tested that with the latest Kubernetes code.
I think NFS doesn't support attach core.
Oh, this, okay, so it's probably just, so
attacher.
it doesn't matter. Okay, because we did add that the share, it was used to be in the annotation, so we moved that to attributes, and now it actually works. Maybe I can show you offline. So I don't know how.
The teacher is not involved in NFS probably, so it doesn't really hit the code that I'm changing.
Okay, I
so maybe that's not used. Okay.
I thought this was already done too. But I guess it wasn't. And we could take a look offline.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Jan. And then finally, Patrick just joined us. He left a message in the chat. I think he had to jump off for dinner. And he says, regarding the master breakage, I discovered and filed this issue. Host path must implement get plugin capabilities. The example from this fails with the current images. The external attacher runs into a fatal error and terminates. This is querying the host path driver, which says that I haven't looked into it, but get plugin capabilities isn't implemented. Does anybody have an update on this?
I briefly chatted with that person. Sorry, I didn't get his name. And basically, I was planning to reproduce it and see what's going on, because up to this morning, host path was working fine. I think it might have been introduced not by changing the host path, but maybe two changes yesterday in attacher and the provisioner. But it's just a guess. So I have no proof or anything yet.
Okay. Okay, can you help investigate that offline?
Definitely, I'll do that.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Cool. Okay, next up are bugs. CSI volume plugin provisioner and attacher should not ignore missing secrets. Let's check on the status of these. The PRs were out.
So for provisioner, we have a PR, just waiting for rebase.
Okay.
Teacher, I'm working on it right now.
Okay.
And for the internal volume plugin, well, we are in code freeze, so I'm not sure. We have a PR, but it misses the labels and approvers and everything. I'm not sure if we should wait for 1.11.
Yeah. Yeah, we can wait for 1.10.1. It's basically a bug fix.
Okay.
Just go ahead and submit it as a bug fix if we can get it.
The PR is already there.
No, the PR is already there. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll take a look at that. If we can't get into 110, we'll get into 110.1.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Next up is CSI node publish read only is never set. I believe, yes, Lynn sent out PRs for both of, this already got merged, sorry. This got merged this past week, and we decided to go with Lynn's approach. So I'm gonna go ahead and set that as green. Should provisioner and attacher use storage v1 beta 1 instead of v1 alpha 1? We said yes. Jan, I imagine this is a to-do.
Yes, this is to do. And does anyone have experience with pulling client Go with not released Kubernetes?
No, sorry.
Client Go with what?
We have v1 beta 1 API in Kubernetes, and it is not released yet, and I need the client Go for that. Okay, I will pull it from somewhere somehow.
Can you just point to the v1 beta 1, or sorry, the I think there's tags
that is
for beta.
Beta 1 and beta 4 and whatever.
If you just
Yeah, but
grab
it's
that.
Kubernetes. I will need to grab client Go
Oh, I
from
think
somewhere.
client Go also does something similar.
Yeah, I thought client Go was updated. I guess it's not.
Really? Okay. Never mind. I will find out.
Okay. Cool. Thank you. Next up, secret refs. Who do they authenticate, authorize, Kubernetes or end users? Who fills them in? So we discussed, these are the PRs above, right?
Yeah, we discussed it last time, I think.
Yeah. I'm going to go ahead and remove that then.
Yeah.
Through. Plugin capabilities, update for external provisioner and external attacher. These should have already merged. Yep. And the second one, I believe, is also merged. Great. Okay. We'll go ahead and mark that green. Thank you to Nick Wren for that. And finally, Patrick added in host path returns empty capabilities, which causes external attacher to fail. So this is what we discussed above, I believe. Number 68. Yeah. Okay, we'll move that down here. And so Sergey is going to take a look at that. Okay, I don't think we have enough time to go through all the individual tasks. Is there any update anybody wants to provide for any of these really quickly?
So the NFS one, so that one works now. The only thing that needs to get merged is the change to the image link that got updated. There was a PR.
Which image link?
This is so this is for the NFS. Basically, there is the example file there. All the image link needs to be updated to 0.2.0.
Yeah. In the documentation.
It's in there's examples in .yaml files. It's under the NFS directory.
Okay.
So that's the only thing.
Cool.
Left.
And that sounds great. Awesome. So we'll keep that orange for now until that's done.
Okay.
I have a question along those lines. I mean, you see, we're providing some examples in the documentation and pointing to specific images. You asked Luis to remove 0-to-0 images now, but all our examples are pointing to 0-to-0 images. So should we change it to point to Canary, or basically the reason 0-to-0 images was created is because basically everything was pointing to them and not to the Canary.
Got it. That's a good point. Can we cut a handpick one of the Canaries as a temporary 0-to-0 to prevent these from breaking?
I could just make all the Canaries from today 0-to-0 and keep moving them.
Well, what I don't want is like a constantly moving 0-to-0. Ideally, what we should have is like alpha releases, beta releases, and then the official final release. Having always pointing to head means any change in head breaks everybody else.
But that's fine. I'm just saying that if we do it today, we know where it came from. Right now, we have no idea where it came from.
Yeah.
What I mean?
So that's fine. So what you're suggesting is manually marking today's builds as 0-to-0?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's fine. But as long as Canary or 0-to-0 doesn't continuously move.
No, it won't move until next time we say we should tag it.
Okay. That seems reasonable to me then.
Yeah.
Sergey, does that sound good?
Yeah, absolutely. As long as we have something 0-to-0 at that location is great.
Okay, cool. Sounds good. We'll keep going through this. On the documentation side, the Kubernetes IO documentation merged, so that's green. The other thing I realized is that for the tests, for the internal components, there is already a CI that is running. So the only thing that's needed is end-to-end testing and possibly more unit tests. But the nice thing is that the CI is already running. Luis already set this up. And that's pretty much it. Okay, anything else you guys want to talk about? All right, then we will end it now. See
Thank you, guys.
Friday. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.